"You always look sad," a child said to me. "Not always, just sometimes. It's normal, you see." "And you're always so scared," she followed up with. "Not always, but sometimes. It's hard not to be." "You always look happy," I said to the child. "Not always, just sometimes," she said with a smile. "And you're always so brave," I followed up with. "Not always, but sometimes. More fun means more risk." The things I make for myself are nicer than the things that I make for others, and it's not because I'm holding back or gatekeeping. My mom is actually the one that brought this to my attention, and now I can't unsee it. I tend to take more risk when making things for myself because there isn't as much pressure to make sure everything is absolutely perfect. But while I'm doing everything in my power to make sure a project is absolutely flawless, and mind you, it never ends up absolutely flawless, I'm losing something else in the process. When you don't have a death grip on the process and outcome, you'll end up doing things you didn't plan for and experimenting in ways you couldn't have foreseen. Now, there is still a design process that goes into every project before I ever even cut into the fabric, whether the end product is for myself or for someone else. However, you'll never actually know how a design or pattern will translate to the garment until you start the garment construction. Essentially, there's a gap between the design and the end result. This gap is either a place to get really creative or just color inside the lines. If I stay inside the lines, I have a sure bet that the end result will be predictably good. But a sure bet isn't always the best bet. Contrastly, if I allow myself the freedom to bend the rules of creativity a little, I probably won't end up with a predictable finished product. And there's a chance I end up with something worse than the initial design that I hate. But there's also the opportunity to make something far better than I could have ever predicted. Hello, and welcome to another video. In this video, I am making the summer dress of my dreams. And let me tell you, this project did not turn out how I initially thought that it would. It turned out better and nicer and a little bit more formal than I was going for. So the plan was to make a bodice from, I saw a picture on Pinterest, which is where a lot of my inspiration comes from. And this blouse was so pretty, and I thought that blouse would make a beautiful top of a dress. So I wanted to turn the bodice into the design that I saw that blouse. And that's what I set out to do. But in the mock-up process, I don't know how I stumbled upon the idea of gathering the top portion of the bodice, but I did. And when I did, and I made the first mock-up, I thought it would be irresponsible not to go with this choice, especially given the fabric that I have. And the funny thing is, if I had made the initial design that I had in my mind with this fabric, I don't think it would have turned out the way that I wanted it to, because this fabric is so flowy and it loves to shift and warp, and it could be a little bit difficult to work with depending on the way that you look at it. So gathering the top portion of the bodice was actually so necessary. Of course, I didn't know that at the time, but looking back, it was like this design was made for this fabric. So it wasn't initially what I thought I was going to do, but I'm so glad that I ended up somewhere that I didn't plan on being. Something else that this process taught me was how to add extra, what is the word that I'm looking for? Extra volume to a pattern piece. Initially, when I made the first mock-up, I just added a few extra inches onto each side of the bodice piece. And sure, that gave me the gathers that I was looking for, but it also created some really distorted side seams, and that wasn't going to work. And then I thought, oh wait, you put it in the middle. So you saw earlier when I was drafting the pattern pieces, that is how I actually got these gathers in. And I don't know, I've never been in a formal gathering class. I've never been in a formal pattern making class. I don't actually know a lot of the theory behind how this works. I just kind of follow common sense and see where it takes me, along with the basic knowledge that I have gathered from the great and marvelous YouTube University, of which I am a proud graduate. Anyways, you add it to the center front rather than the side seams where your armhole is. You want to add that into the front, so it has this like A-line looking weird thing. I wasn't sure if it was gonna work, but I thought, well, at least the side seams will be straight, so this must be how people do it. So I did. I ended up having to add more than I thought because there weren't enough gathers. So I ended up adding like 4.5, maybe even 5 inches of extra volume to the center of my bodice to get the amount of gathers that I was looking for. I also added a lining to this bodice because I also added a lining to the bodice because this fabric is very sheer and I didn't want it to be see-through, obviously. So we added a lining to this bodice. And if you're wondering, I only had 3 yards of this fabric. 3 yards is kind of my favorite it's my favorite volume of fabric to buy because I know that I can make a full dress with sleeves for myself with 3 yards of fabric. And that's how many yards I needed for this. And I still had maybe a yard left over, like half a yard. I had a little left over, and so I made a headscarf, and I'm gonna make a bow and, you know, make some fun accessories to go with it. But that's how much fabric I used. I also went ahead and interfaced the whole neckline because, once again, the fabric is really soft and flowy and pliable, and it just loves to move, which is wonderful for like the skirt portions and for the sleeves that you'll see a little later. But for the neckline, I really needed it to stay in place. So I interfaced everything. I interfaced the outer layer, the lining layer, and then did my understitching. Everything was interfaced because I needed that neckline to stay where it was. Something else that I forgot to mention is I was going to have a square neckline, but after I gathered, I thought, I don't know if a square neckline is really going to mesh well with the new design that I'm going for. So we made a very rounded scoop neckline. Good morning. It's day number 2 of sewing this dress. I finished the bodice last night and then I was finished for the day. Something I wanted to talk about because I don't think I mentioned it before, but this fabric I got from Moon Fabrics, which is a fabric distributor out of New York, and they have an online store, and that's where I got this. This was actually on sale for $9.99 a yard. Really, really pretty. It's a very light fabric, and I think it's viscose. I don't actually remember because I got it so long ago and I had it sitting because I wasn't sure what I wanted to make with it, but I think it's I don't know if it's 100% viscose. You know, let me look it up. Okay, I found it. It is 50% viscose, 50% viscose eco vero. I don't know what that means. So basically 100% viscose. It's eco-friendly. I'm pretty sure that's what that second one is. But I got it on the Moon Fabrics website and it is amazing. I really like it. So the plan for today is to make the sleeves and the skirt. This is the skirt pattern that I think I'm gonna work with. I have 3 skirt patterns. I have one that's for varying widths of A-line. Then I have one that is just like the basic block, which is a pencil skirt. And then I have this one, which is the just A-line. It's barely A-line. You can see the line right here, and then this is where it goes out. So it's very slightly A-line. For this particular skirt on this dress, I want a bit of a flare skirt, so I'll probably about like to down here, I want the pencils design. Well, what am I saying? Okay, so about midway down, I want it to be pretty straight, and then at the bottom I want it to flare out because I think that looks really flattering. So this one, I think I made this pattern. I used this one for the everywhere dress. I'm pretty sure this is the everywhere dress design, but it's the closest to what I want this pattern to look like instead of having to draft an entirely new pattern. So I'm going to use this as my base for the skirt. And then this is our pattern for the sleeve. The sleeve is going to come about like to the elbow, a little above the elbow. And then I'm going to have some really pretty ruffles. I want like, yeah, that's right. Yeah, I said that right. Okay. And then I'm gonna have ruffles at the bottom, so it'll come out on each side and it'll be really ruffly, and that'll come like just over the elbow. So it'll be a little shorter than a three-quarter length sleeve, I believe. But that's the plan. We don't know what's gonna actually happen. I'm also going to tackle an arch nemesis of mine, which is pockets. I have had the absolute worst experience with pockets in the past, and now that I've taken a little bit more note, paid attention to other clothes that I have seen with pockets, a lot of time they have a different material than the actual garment, and it's like a very sheer lining material. And I'm thinking maybe that's why I've had bad luck with pockets in the past, because I've been using the same fabric, and if it's pretty heavy, that could cause some issues. So this time I'm going to use lining to make the pockets. I got this from Walmart. I'm also going to use it to put under the skirt because this fabric is so sheer. That's why we had to add a lining to the bodice. I don't think I have enough fabric to double up on the skirt, so I bought some lining. This is 2 yards, and I'm also going to use this to make the pockets, and I'm hoping that works out.
Spoiler alert, the pockets turned out perfectly, which I was honestly a little bit surprised. I always have issues with the pockets laying flat and being invisible, so you only know that there's a pocket there once you stick your hand in the pocket. I have had so much trouble getting them to lay flat, and I've tried everything. So it was a big deal that these pockets worked out, and so I was so glad that I was able to put pockets in a dress, and it worked out perfectly for the first time ever, so yay me. Next up, I moved on to the ruffles that I'm going to add at the bottom of the sleeves. This is the pattern that I'm cutting out here. I kind of freehanded it and not a lot of thought went into it, but this is the pattern that I cut out for my ruffles, and just cut that out of the fabric, and then when you stretch it out straight, you have ruffles. That's how it works, and it's so simple, but the rewards, wonderful. I love these ruffles. I'm gonna use this sleeve pattern for other dresses. I can just feel it because it's so simple, but it's just so fun. It's just a little something that makes you a little extra happy. So I really love these.
I do not know where the time has gone, truthfully. I finished the sleeves. I didn't even get a chance to attach them. I mean, somebody did come over and that kind of got in the way of what I was doing, but I started making these sleeves at like 10 in the morning, this morning, and it's almost 7 now, and I haven't even attached them yet. I should have finished those sleeves long ago and attached them a long ago. I don't know how it's possible that I'm still working on the sleeves, but they're not even attached, so I'm gonna have to postpone that tomorrow because I have a church function to get to now, and by the time I get back, I'll just need to go to bed at that point. So we will attach the sleeves and start on the skirt tomorrow. I feel like projects previous to this one, I'm usually done by now, but this one is different for some reason. So I don't know why it's taking so long, but we're done for the day. I will see you guys tomorrow.
I think part of my issue is learning to let go and not being too rigid. And I notice this mentality bleeding into other aspects of my life. It is not only exclusive to sewing.
I tend to like to control things as much as possible so that I can predict what the end result will be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are times where you need to loosen your grip and allow things to run their course. When I first design a dress and I make the pattern and cut it out, I don't know how the pattern is going to react with the specific fabric that I've chosen. You have to pick stiffer fabrics for more structured garments and flowier fabrics for something that you want to have a little bit more movement to. But until I actually put the pattern to the fabric and cut it out, I don't know exactly how it's going to react. I wouldn't use a corduroy to make a flowy dress, and I wouldn't use a flowy dress material like a viscose, like I used in this dress, to make a trench coat. Why? Because the idea and the fabric have to match. And sometimes you think you have a really good idea, but when you actually start handling things, you realize, I need to tweak this a little bit. And being willing to tweak those ideas and to change things up so that it works better is what you need to create the best result possible. Now, I'm not saying that if you plan something out, following each and every one of your bullet points is a bad thing. But sometimes we settle for less, not knowing that there was something better if we had just challenged that maybe the first idea isn't always the best one. And I do that so often. I have a hard time moving aside from my initial idea and trying something else because maybe a square neckline isn't as nice as a scoop neckline. And maybe a scoop is not as nice as a boat. The point is, if you're too rigid, if the wind comes and blows you, you won't bend with the wind. You'll just break. I am trying to apply this principle not only to the work that I do with sewing, but also into other aspects of my life. Learning to be flexible and take life as it comes to me. Experimenting is huge. And what I mean by that is the trial and error process that comes along with figuring your way out is where creativity starts to truly shine. If I had never started messing around with different ideas when it came to this particular dress, I would have never ended up with the dress that I have now. But I'm so glad that I did. And the thing is, I did have a design in mind, and I liked my design. But the dress I actually made, there was no design written down for it anywhere. There was no illustration. So I'm going to actually do this process backwards, where the dress is the design, and now I have to go back and draw the illustration. And sometimes that's how it's going to be. You can't always know how things are going to turn out until you actually start handling the fabric of what it actually is. So the moral of the story is, don't be afraid to take risks. Sometimes your proudest accomplishments, most treasured memories, and biggest breakthroughs are on the other side of a really big risk. I also want a really cool name for this dress design, so if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them down in the comments. Something really elegant and feminine sounding is what I'm going for, but I don't have any ideas at the moment. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I will see you next time, and remember to keep it classy. I have had the absolute worst experience. With poppets. Man, talking. I'm telling you, when the camera turns on, nothing makes sense anymore.